Okay, the iPad says it's 6 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. This is a regular assembly meeting of January 18th, 2022. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jeff,
Here.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Here.
Chelsea, Thomas,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Jay,
Here.
Okay, that brings us to the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Public for which it stands, one nation, under. Okay, next on tonight's agenda, approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes, and that's from the January 3rd meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes if there's no changes.
So moved. Second.
Okay, hearing no changes, all those in favor of approving that, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item 4, amendment and approval of tonight's meeting agenda. If there's no amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda as presented. So moved.
Second.
No amendments then, I'm guessing. So all those in favor of moving forward like presented, say aye.
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 Aye. Item 5, public hearings. There are none tonight. Bid awards. There are no bid awards this evening. Are there any people in the audience to be heard related to items on today's agenda? If there are, just step up to the mic, and I don't think there's anybody in the queue, right, Clerk Thompson?
there is not.
Okay, seeing no interest from the audience, we'll move to item 8, persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. So anybody would like to speak or introduce themselves, or now would be a good time to step to the podium and state your name, and you have a 5-minute limit.
Good evening. My name is Mark Testoni. I'm a new resident here in town, about 18 months. I'm one of the newly appointed people to the Public Safety Board. I just wanted to introduce myself to you people and to Steve. I'm looking forward to getting the board working again. It's my understanding it really it's been kind of in flux for the last couple of years. And looking forward to meeting with Dan Sullivan and Mr. Bennett. And I know there's one other gentleman, his name is Dr. Tasillo, who I see at the hospital on a regular basis. Just to give you a little bit of history about myself, I'm a retired sergeant from the Connecticut State Police. I did 21 years there. I was a trooper, a resident trooper. I worked in major crimes, which is basically the homicide division for the state of Connecticut, and computer crimes. When I retired there, I went to work for the Mashantucket Pequot Nation Police Department in Connecticut, which is under BIA. I served as a sergeant there for 5 years. And that's kind of my background. I just really wanted to meet everybody for the first time, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Hey, thank you for coming up and introducing yourself. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on items unrelated to tonight's agenda? Seeing no interest, we'll move forward. Boards, commission, and committee reports. There are none tonight. There's nothing on the consent agenda. That brings us to report of other officers, and the mayor's report is first on that, and very short again this evening. The Petersburg Borough is accepting letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community by filling one of the vacant seats on the following borough boards or commissions. And this would last until October of 2022 at the next municipal election. Planning Commission, there's 2 vacant seats. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, there's 2 vacant seats. And letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the borough offices located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by sending to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And I was going to ask the clerk if you knew off the top of her head, with these 2 vacancies and these on the 1 commission and the advisory board, do they have a quorum at this time without these seats being filled?
I believe yes, because the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, I believe it's 5 members and a quorum would be 3.
Okay, I'm just kind of curious. So anyway, if you're interested, please put in your name. And that brings us to the manager's report. No written report tonight, but Steve will give a verbal.
I'll give you a verbal report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, we had a lot to do, and a lot of what we've been working on was snow related. The warmer weather has definitely helped a lot. Our crews are slowly catching up, particularly in our own public works yard and around town. Mostly minor damage. We had some minor leaks. There, one of them. Although the school admin building and we had an awning over at Public Works that collapsed, may have got a little more damage than we'd like. School's working with their insurance company to take a look at it. I just wanted a huge thank you to all the volunteers, contractors, the U.S. Coast Guard, school, borough, and hospital staff who worked on snow removal and emergency response issues over that kind of 10-day span that involved all of us. Reached out to the Klingon Hyatt Housing. They are very interested in talking about another project like the airport subdivision. They're waiting on grant information, and which should come later this month. And then I'll have more to share after I have a chance to meet with them after they get that information on the grants. I attended the second coastal communities meeting. This is a kind of a group of coastal communities throughout Alaska to discuss priorities and issues for the upcoming legislative session. The group includes communities and regional groups like Southeast Conference, along with AML, mayors, borough managers, and just, ferry discussion, as well as other issues that affect coastal communities. We are seeing an increase in COVID cases again. Sandy and I have been attending a meeting at the hospital and school mornings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As of writing this, no hospitalizations and 26 positive cases. I've not changed anything as far as how we're addressing it at this point, but just keeping an eye on it. There is a huge shortage of the antigen test kits all over the United States. Hospital staff is working on some possible solutions. Our biggest concern is what this will mean for the summer season and not potentially having them available. So we'll see what happens. Gloria Ann and I will be meeting with some of the representatives of Sea Alaska and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to talk about potential for the harbor in Scow Bay. This is scheduled for January 24th, and where the Corps will actually kind of explain how Sea Alaska could help us with being a project sponsor, which then saves money on some of the upfront engineering. We need to learn more about it as well, so I can bring that back to the assembly to look at. We are trying to review the various programs associated with the recent federal legislation on infrastructure. So much of it is not really geared towards a small community, so it's trying to weed through all of it to figure out what benefits us and what doesn't, and what fits with the assembly's priorities and capital projects. So it's a bit of a work. Luckily, the funding on that is multiple years, so we're not behind the 8 ball or anything, but it is having to go through and try to figure out what applies to us and what doesn't. And I've reached out to some of the borough and hospital folks involved in the harbor and airport traffic to start the process of understanding what the community and the assembly want us to do for the upcoming tourism and fishing seasons. I think I copied the assembly on kind of my little brainstorming thing. The biggest challenge is clearly, as always, money and people. And we'll start with the cruise ships that are probably the easiest group in that sense, is being able to tell them what we want and expect. But after that, it gets a little harder as far as what we can do if we have to try to patrol the airport or things like that. So anyway, we'll keep working on it. I kind of wanted a mitigation plan soon so that we can give it to the cruise companies as they are making their plans, and we can tell them what's expected of their visitors when they come off the boat, or if they don't come off the boat. Anyway, that was it.
Questions of the manager? Member Lynn?
Yeah, Steve, there was kind of a southeast-wide group that was put together. It was mostly represented by Ketchikan, related to the cruise industry in Southeast. Have they taken any kind of, have they got back together and have they taken any kind of position on some kind of a unified process for, either vaccination or entry into our towns?
Not that I'm aware of. I have not heard anything from them. Hopefully, Dave can find out when he's at Southeast Conference uh, we're not hearing from that group back at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Tremblay.
Just on the note of the COVID tests, I thought I'd share what Liz sent out to all of us about every household can now request free COVID tests, and it's 4 per address. And so it's a PO, for us, it'd be a PO box. And so people can go to, it's covidtests.gov. And so that's just started today. So we'll see how it goes, but every individual can sign up for 4 tests there. So it's not a permanent solution, but it's better than nothing. And here we are on the airwaves telling everyone to go do it. So just adding on to you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of the manager? Okay, thank you, Steve, on your
Yes, sir.
report. That brings us to unfinished business. One item under unfinished business, and that's ordinance 2021-22. This is an ordinance of the Petersburg Borough adjusting the fiscal year 2022 budget for known changes. It's in its 3rd and final reading. And just for a note for people listening, and I'm sure the assembly is aware of it, but Public Works Director Cotta requests amendment to the ordinance to add $170,150 to the Public Works fiscal year 2022 budget to cover unexpected expenses due to the unusually heavy snowfall this winter. And there is an attachment. With that being said, I'd entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2021-22 in its 3rd reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion. Member Stan Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move to amend this ordinance to add $170,150 to the Public Works fiscal year 2022 budget to cover unexpected expenses due to the unusually heavy snowfall this winter.
Second.
Okay, there's an amendment on the floor. Discussion on the amendment. I'm looking through the memo from Mr. Cotta. There's one part on there. I'm trying to find it here, scrolling through it. I believe it was like $45,000 for a V snowplow for the front of the grader. Is this money just coming out of the budget for Public Works, or would something like that come from the motor pool? A pretty expensive piece of equipment. Okay, I think Jody's with us. I thought I saw her up there. Jody, are you picking us up there?
Yeah, I couldn't pick up anything that Chris said at all.
Can I jump in? Jody, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. When we're talking about the V plow, which was part of the supplemental budget, belief was that that would come out of the motor pool fund. And Chris just made a statement that unless Jody wanted it coming from a different place. Is that what you had in mind was motor pool?
I believe it was going to come from the Public Works Department because they hadn't been contributing money to the motor pool fund for this certain piece of equipment.
So from the standpoint of the supplemental budget, then it'd be coming out of the general fund.
Correct. Which eventually it would anyway, you know, the general fund makes contributions into the motor pool fund for these pieces of equipment.
Yeah, thank you for that
Thanks, Jody.
clarification. That's the only
Yep.
question I had. Any other Member Kinsinger?
Yes, Chris, were you able to locate additional sand?
Okay, any other discussion on this amendment? Okay, clerk call the roll on the amendment to add this request from Mr. Cotta to the supplemental budget.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the amendment passes unanimously. Now it's back to the main motion as amended. So any discussion on the main motion as amended? Member Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How about just for the folks at home, if we could just get a rundown of all the items that are listed on there. We talked about the V-blade and we talked about the sand, but just for the folks at home, if we could just get a brief rundown on what those items were, so folks know what money was spent on what over the last couple of weeks.
If you
Yep.
don't mind, being told that nobody can hear you.
So Member Bucci, you just want a rundown item by item on the.
Yeah.
Testing,
amendment?
testing.
No, just on the amendment of that. Just
Okay,
what
for
we just
Public
voted.
Works Amendment. to
Yeah.
Add to 170.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Cotta.
All right, can everybody hear me okay on this one?
I can.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
So yeah, the components of that supplemental budget number was $30,000 of that was for additional overtime pay for the crew. And we had budgeted about 34 for the year. We've used up most, if not all of that. I don't have the very latest numbers from Jody, but yeah, we're on pace to be out of overtime allocation for the crew very shortly if we aren't already. So that 30,000 should be sufficient to get us to the end of the year if we, have a quote unquote normal winter from here on out. It's like any budget, it's just a projection. We don't really know, but that's what that number's for. There's 6,000 in there for some additional calcium ice melt. This is what we use for the hills in town. Some of the steeper spots, Kings Row, for instance, we use calcium on those areas to try and keep the ice down. We've gone through over half our supply for the winter, and so that amounts just to lay in a little bit of extra stock to ensure we don't run out. There's a $5,000 item in there for a snow blower purchase. That was something that we, when we got this really heavy snow, we discovered that the snow blowers we have in stock were not working all that well. And we needed, we needed that capability and didn't really have it. So in talking with Steve, we decided to order a couple snow blowers, one for Public Works that'll be used for sidewalks and building entrances and roofs if we ever need to do that again, hopefully not. But yeah, so there's one on here. This $5,000 is the one that was allocated for Public Works. I believe there's another one going to a different department. There's some money in here for additional sand. We put in $40,000, which would be enough to buy 1,000 tons of sand at the regular price of $40 a ton. We typically start a season with about 2,000 tons, and that's what we had on hand this fall. And we've gone through at least half, maybe over that. And so that $40,000, if we can find some sand available, we'd like to purchase some more, just again to ensure that we get to the end of the winter without running out. There is $24,000, a little over $24,000 in there for professional services, which was a short contract with Reed Brothers for additional snow removal. Due to the amount of snow we got and the fact that a lot of it didn't melt off, it just kept building up, and then we'd get, we got, I think, 18 inches at one point. It just started piling up everywhere, and the snow dumps got a little out of hand. And so we were just reaching out to different contractors we even reached out to former employees just to see what we could do to get some additional resources brought online. Reed Brothers was able to assist with a couple of trucks and a piece of equipment. So we engaged them for a short-term contract, and they were a huge help. So that $24,000 is the cost for their services. Some additional fuel usage is also in there, $10,000, and that's just to basically make up for what I project will be a little shortfall in our public works fuel budget. When we do a lot of snow removal, we burn a lot of fuel, and so that will augment our fuel budget accordingly. Also have $10,000 in there for additional contract snow removal, and that's at Papke's. We have a contract with Rock and Road to do plowing out there. As of today, we've already exceeded our budget for Papke's snow removal. Rock and Road gave me an updated invoice, and we're right around $11,000 so far through today, and we budgeted 10. So I put an extra 10,000 in there that'll hopefully again get us to the end of the season. And then the last item is the front V plow for the grader. This is something we've thought about putting in the budget in the past, and we're always trying to meet budget goals, so we take it out. However, with these heavy snowfalls, we really are feeling the need for this item. What it will do is it'll allow us to be more efficient with the grader. The heavy snows that we've been getting actually push the front end of the grader up. So, it takes a lot longer to grade because you lose control of the front end of the machine, and the operator has to back down and then go back at it again. Another reason to have that is just when we do a lot of these cul-de-sacs and road aprons that we do with the grader, it's kind of hard to get the corners and those cul-de-sac areas with the wing on the grader. It's much more efficient if we have a plow on the front end of the machine, which we don't have right now. So this V plow is more of a thing that will help us out with heavier snowfalls, and that isn't necessarily going to be a right now thing. I threw it in there because I feel like it's something we can justify purchasing, and if we don't go ahead and try to buy one now, we'll end up putting in the budget, for FY23 for sure. We're just seeing that it's a piece of equipment that can really be of a big benefit to us and help us get the most out of the machine that we have. So anyway, that's my rundown of all those items. Sorry, that was a little verbose, but anybody have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cotta, for giving us the details, and for the people listening at home. And if there's no other discussion or input on this ordinance as amended, will the clerk please call the roll?
David,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob, Jay,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2021-22 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. That brings us to item 15 on this evening's agenda, new business. There is no new business before us this evening. Next item is 16, communications. And it's on the agenda or on our website, the communications after December 30th, 2021. And I believe there was only 2 items. It's a policy we don't read the communications at the assembly meetings. So next item is assembly discussion items. 2 items. First item is ARPA funding work session draft agenda. Attached is draft agenda for the January 24th, 2022 work session regarding the borough's ARPA funds. Member Mucci, would you like to start the discussion?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. This is a draft agenda. I told people I'd have it for you at this meeting. Clerk Thompson's been helping me put this all together. It's kind of it's changed even this afternoon. So you don't have the final, but I've also invited Phil Hofstetter and Erica Cook-Painter to talk to us as well, getting our needs. And it's just, I imagine the hour will go rather quickly. But this is more or less who we have invited to speak to us. It's just hearing some of the concerns amongst the community, what like the school, the hospital, and hear from Nils Andresen from Alaska Municipal League about what other communities are doing with some of the funds, and a presentation from Jody Tao, the finance director, about the ARPA fund balance and some guidelines for it. So I imagine there'll be more paperwork coming out between now and next Monday. So if you don't have any questions, or if there's other people you'd like for us to make sure they were there, please let us know. This will be able to be attended via Zoom and or in person. So it's 4 o'clock on January 24th. So thank you.
Hey, Member Tremblay.
Thank you. And this is just a clarification. Anyone will be able to invited to speak
Yes.
or to ask to be invited to speak
Mr. Mayor.
beyond the formal agenda.
Yes, that's how it's going. It's not going to be a free for all. It'll just be these people here who have a big stake in the community about either childcare, hospitals, schools. Yeah, if there's folks you think that we haven't considered, but I think there's folks from the Share Coalition on here as well as the hospital and school, and it looks like it should cover most of them. So.
Any other input on this discussion item? I am not sure I'll be able to attend that. I've got a pretty busy workload ahead of me here before the Tanner season. So, 4 o'clock in the afternoon is right at the end of the workday. But I would suggest, like we've done in the past for work sessions, that we still have somebody there to potentially be the chair or to keep things flowing and just to recognize people who want to speak, unless you have a, very definitive agenda where, people speak. But anyway, just a suggestion. But, any other input on that? Any other discussion? Okay, next item, 17B, Borough Employee Hiring Process. Assembly Member Mucci would like to discuss the borough's hiring process, and that's where this discussion should go, is just talking about the general hiring process, not any individual hires. And before we get started, I asked the clerk if she would just give us, for the people listening on the radio and for all of us to hear it from the clerk all at once, the general hiring process for the Petersburg Borough.
You bet. Thank you. So when we have a vacant position, a position becomes vacant. First of all, the manager needs to approve any filling the position. So step number one is to get manager approval to advertise for the vacant position. We first post the vacant position in-house to give current employees a chance per our collective bargaining agreements to apply for the job before it goes out to the public if they choose. If we do not end up hiring an in-house candidate, we put out a public ad and we receive applications. We check the applications for completeness. On the borough's application, employment application, there is a form that the applicant signs saying that authorizing us to run a background check. So for general borough employees, we have hired a company out of Ketchikan that performs background checks for us. They're called the safety specialists. And so it is different for the police department. They are governed by the Alaska Police Standards Council, so that it's much more stringent. And for the Mountain View Manor assisted living facility, the state of Alaska conducts that background check for people who want to work there. But for the general borough employee, we have TSS do the check for us. We don't perform the check yet, though. After the applications are deemed to be complete, the human resources and department head choose who they want to interview, look at the applications, choose people to interview, complete the interviews. Once the interviews are done, the applicants that are being considered, we will call references. And if there's someone that the department head feels that this is the person they would like to hire for the position, the first step is to bring it to the manager and explain why, you know, what we've done, what the process has been, and here's why we want to hire this person. So we get approval from the manager before even offering the position to the employee. So first of all, manager approval, and we run the background check on that person, assuming the manager is given the approval. We sometimes, depending on how quickly things are moving, we may make an offer to that employee that is contingent upon the results of the background check. The background check takes 5 to 7 days to get completed, and then the offer is made, and if accepted, the employee starts work. After the employee is hired, when they fill out all their paperwork, we do ask for a copy of the driver's license, and we run a driver's record after hire. And that's the basic process.
Okay, well, thank you for the information. And the member Mucci, would you have any input on this discussion? Item?
Well, I don't know about input, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. You know, over the last couple of weeks, we've had issues we've heard about in the news, this, that, the other, and it just got me to thinking about, well, you know, the overall question is, what does the borough do? What's the process for the borough to hire somebody? While the issue that we dealt with over the last couple of weeks is sensitive and can't be talked, some of it can't be talked about in public, I think it's important for the community.
This discussion is supposed to be just about the
Sure.
hiring and not
Sure.
hinting at things
Sure.
that we've been hearing about in the media. So,
Yep, no, I understand.
okay.
So it was important for me that, that the community is comfortable with the process that goes on when we're hiring individuals who might not be in the general category of the borough. You know, police department is a different thing, and it's a much more intense interview process, hiring process, the whole thing. And I've had an opportunity to kind of go over some of the documents that go into some of the interview process, and it's a really intense process. There's a questionnaire called the Police Department Pre-Employment Polygraph Questionnaire it is a tough document to sit through. It asks a lot of personal questions about people's past. It talks about employment history. It really digs into finances, past history, medical, drug use. It talks about being part of, and at the end of every question, it asks the question is, after you're done with all these 9 sections, are you intentionally concealing any information regarding such and such a thing? So after you've gone through the initial screening of this pre-employment polygraph questionnaire, they ask you again if you're misleading anybody. And I felt much better about it after I read this, and I sat down and talked with department heads about different things and how they went about the process. You don't just get hired as a person, you have to ride with other people. And it was just, I felt much more comfortable with the whole process. And I just wanted the community to know that, yeah, there's an extensive system in place for making sure we get good people in town to work for either the police department or any, like Debbie mentioned, Mountain View Manor, which is, I've got another population that we need to take care of. And I think it's just really important that the community hear somewhat of a discussion at the assembly level, or you're just gonna hear it from me, that I was very comfortable listening to and looking into how people were hired at this department. And I just wanted to throw it out there in case anybody had any questions or comments. And yeah, that was the purpose of having it on the agenda.
Okay, just through the mayor, I wanted to make sure it was clear. What Debbie described is for a certain group of employees that included the manor twist. That the police department has a totally different process. It's even more involved. It's more along what Assemblywoman Ricci's talked about. So again, what she described is for the just most of our employees, police department, including dispatchers, go through a different process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question regarding the hiring practices for the borough. Is there a reason we use a private background check and not an FBI background check?
Good question.
What's the thinking? Is it cheaper or is it?
I honestly do not know. With this company is used by many, what did I do with my form? By many other communities, municipalities in Southeast Alaska. So that's kind of, I got good feedback from other places. And so that's kind of why we checked into TSS there out of Ketchikan. I actually never looked into, how do you do an FBI check? The FBI is not really going to do that for you, right? Someone else has to do it.
Someone's done one on me
Huh?
as a member of the Alaska Bar.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, is that the question? Do you have another question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, you spoke to the general hiring practices for borough employees. I was hoping, since Chief Kerr is here at this meeting with us, if he might speak to some of the hiring practices for the police department.
Mr. Kerr, do you want to give us the rundown on your procedure?
Yes. Okay. So as far as the background for police officers, for the hiring process, we have a standard that's set through Alaska Police Standards Council. One of the things you actually have to do is they have in Alaska statutes in 13 AAC 85.010, it outlines what you have to have and what you can't have to be a police officer. So then as far as the hiring process, you have to complete the borough application. You have to complete the F3 personal history statement and provide all supporting documents as well. And this thing on both these applications, if you leave something out, we'll contact you thinking it's a mistake. And if you fail to provide information, it's automatic disqualification from the process. And then we'll screen at the F3, which is the background questionnaire that is attached to the meeting packet. And there's automatic disqualifications for drug use, crimes, stuff like that, that automatically disqualifies you. And then you can do anything above and beyond that to disqualify people as well. So like the state has a thing for drug use, 10 years. If you had drug use in 10 years, I don't want you in my department. That just shows that it's questionable. To me, it shows that it might be a questionable person. Says if you had more than 2 DUIs in a certain amount of time, you can't be a police officer. But if you've had 1 DUI, we have serious problems. Now for me to trust that person out on the street. So, I mean, we can set stricter guidelines. So if they meet the state standards and our standards, then they move on in the process. We invite them for a written test. We have a written test through the Standard and Associates National Police Officer Testing. If they pass that, they move on to the physical agility testing part of it. And then if they pass that as well, they move on to the oral board interview. So that's where we sit down with them. It's some police officers, sometimes it's Sandy or someone from the fire department. We have HR, sometimes it's Debbie. We get people from different departments, or we've even used the school as well and mental health when they were still here in town practicing. And we have an oral interview where we ask them a bunch of questions. Then if they pass that, we all talk about it after, add up all the scores. And if then they'll move on to the background investigation. The background investigation consists of verifying all the information contained in the F3. It also involves social media checks. And basically some people have their stuff set to private. So when we assign someone to do the background, what we'll do is we'll call them up, talk to them, and have them say, hey, you have social media? They say yes. We'll make them add us right there if their stuff is set to private. So we can check it right away. The borough also has the TSS. We have been having them run that as well. So not only are we doing ours, we're having the borough do theirs as well. And then we also call the references. We verify all the information. We also ask for we ask the references for additional references because anyone can give 3 to 5 references that'll say something good about them. It's what you get afterwards when you're digging into it. So it's a pretty thorough investigation. And let's see. And then if they pass that part, and we have a criminal history check as well that we do that's done by the borough. We have a pre-employment part of it that we can run through APSIN and NCIC. And that'll show if they have FBI numbers, that'll show if they have, it's pretty thorough process on any crimes that they've been arrested, whether it's dismissed or what it was. We get a really good detailed information that's far more than what the borough would just get. And then what we'll do is if they pass that, we move them on, we'll write up a conditional job offer. And the conditional job offer is pending the successful completion of a polygraph, the psychological evaluation, and a medical evaluation. The polygraph examination, what they do on that is the polygraph has a background questionnaire as well that is completely separate than the F3. When we do the polygraphs, we provide all the hiring information to the polygrapher so that they can comb through everything, ask them questions about any of it. If you haven't been through the process, it is an awful process. If you had any sort of questionable background, I guarantee at this point you're pulling out because you do not want to be involved. And then after that, they move on to a psychological evaluation, and you have to get a sign off. It's an F11 form. You have to get signed off saying that you are mentally stable to be a police officer. And I forget the exact verbiage. I have the paperwork if you guys would like to look at it. And then the last thing we do is the medical evaluation. That's an F2A and F2B form that we have to fill out, or they have to fill out one, then they have to take it to the hospital and they have to get checked to make sure that they're physically able to be a police officer. And then once we get all this stuff, we actually have to send it off to the state of Alaska, and they double check our information and they see if they're, just make sure that they're eligible. Then if they get hired, they move on to the field training process. So I understand this is just out. So at this point, they're brought on, but they're on probation at this time, and they have to complete the field training. Field training is your first week on the job as a police officer. You have to review the policies and procedures of the police department. You have to get specialized training on Alaska laws, defensive tactics and firearms, and use of force before you can even go out on the road. And then you are paired up with a field training officer for 12 weeks. Field training officers must fill out a daily progress report on the officer in training. If the FTO notices or field training officer notices the need for remedial training, the plan is developed and the officer is provided the needed training. And this could be anything, could be knowledge in certain subjects, could be the way they handle or approach a car, or a house, or anything. We adapt the training and the FTO process to what we tailor it to what the person needs. And then the sergeant also fills out weekly evaluations, and that's a recap of the previous week. If the officer is struggling in any of these areas, they plan for remedial training. And they're graded on, there's 6 different topics on the field training form, and then each one has their own little categories underneath it. It talks about all different stuff, and they have to sign off on that. And the FTO signs off, and the officer that's getting trained actually has to initial by each one as well to document that they did go over it. Then they attend the Alaska Law Enforcement Training Academy or the Alaska Research Academy. At that point, it could be in the middle of their FTO process, could be at the end of their FTO process. It could just whenever the academies go, we kind of get them in and out. In Alaska, you can work up to 12 months before attending an academy. So that's why we try and get them in, get them through it. And then depending upon when the academy starts, they might go halfway through their process and then they'll come back and finish it. But either way, probation for police officers will extend beyond the required basic police academy for the FT. They will extend 6 months beyond any required basic police academy and a 12-week FTO program. So whatever came after, they're also on probation for 6 months after any one of these, whichever one went last. So that's our process.
Sounds quite involved. Member Klein Wolf?
Thank you. Thank you for providing that rundown, Chief Kerr. If you don't mind, I have a couple follow-up questions regarding your description of the process. And just so I'm clear, you said the APC sets the standards, but that's essentially the floor below which you cannot go, if I understand correctly. And then Petersburg Police Department is imposing additional higher standards on their employees. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We're requiring the additional, they don't require a polygraph for the state, but we do. That's
They
one of
also-
the major things.
Thank you. And they also don't require social media checks.
That's, to me, that's all part of a thorough background.
And you said you utilize the Borough TSS. So am I understanding that the police department background check is also done by TSS?
No.
No, sorry, I misunderstood.
So they filled out a form. Becky has been having them fill out that form, so she'll provide that. And honestly, I know that they're gonna pass that because that's not as involved, but it's still another layer to the process.
And so there is no FBI background check done on police department employees, is that correct?
So if, for us, when you talk about an FBI background check, FBI background checks, they are where they meet you in person. They do, as if we're talking about the same one, like the prior chief, Swihart, he had one done. They actually meet with you. It's super involved, and I don't know any police department that does that. I know if you attend the FBI National Academy through them, they will do one of those on you. So as police, I don't know of them ever doing that for hiring.
And you mentioned the applicant provides their own references that you follow up on. And you said that you get references for the references or additional references? I didn't understand that part.
Yeah, so basically what that is if I ask you for references, you're gonna give me people that'll say good stuff about you. So basically at that point, what I'm doing is I'm talking to those people. I ask them for additional references, and I ask during that background if you have anyone that would say any different about you, if you've had any conflicts, stuff like that. If you have, those are the people I want to talk to figure out what the deal is and what's going on. I mean, you take the good, but then you also have to, not everyone's perfect. So you have to look and see the other side of it too.
It still seems like if your references of references are based on the references provided by the applicant, they're probably likely still to be favorable, especially with applicants, far afield that, may be difficult to know anyone in their community other than the references they provide.
So if you're insinuating that we just talk to those references, that's not true. If it's a prior police officer, we call that department. We talk to that department. We talk to anyone that's willing to talk to us about it. In the police world, someone that's been prior law enforcement, it's very easy to find them. HR most likely won't talk to you. They give you the same candid response. But in our world, police talk. Police don't like bad cops. Police won't sign off on that. And so most likely, if there's something bad, you'll find it through talking with them.
So, okay, so as I understand, the references are mostly within the police world, as you say.
No, you're not understanding.
Excuse me. We're getting a little bit of dialogue going back and forth. I don't think that's what this discussion was intended for. It was just to find out what the process is. And I know you're just finding out what the police process is, but it sounds like there's some, maybe questions on on that process. And if we're going to get into changing the process for how the borough hires and fires people, it's Assembly's involvement in hiring, as far as I can recall in the charter, we hire the manager and that's it. We have no say over who the manager hires and fires. We have to approve the appointment of the clerk by the charter, and we hire the attorney to work for the Assembly and administration. And that is our limit. So if you have another general question of Chief Kerr, floor is yours.
Dan, thanks for answering my questions. I apologize for the back and forth. I'm just trying to get a picture for the general public here listening. One more question. You mentioned that you do a polygraph and a psych eval. And I'm curious, in your opinion, if an applicant harbored anti-government sentiments, at what point during the interview process do you think that's most likely to crop up or, present itself as a problem?
So most likely that would have been found in the background process. If it wasn't found in the background process, it would have been in the F3 or in the polygraph background, in the polygraph phase of it. If they had no prior post, no prior anything, no prior keeping it to themselves, if you hold those beliefs, there's a certain question, there's questions on the polygraph that those things will come up, they should come up. And at that point, you either say yes or you say no. And if you say no and you have those, you're lying and you're done in our process.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up.
Any other Assembly members have input on this hiring process? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in response to that, yeah, question 56 in the polygraph, they specifically ask those type of questions, but I wanted to just ask a question about the field training program, if I can, Steve or the chief. That's a 12-week program, and is that just one officer who's involved in that, or is that several officers over that 12-week period of time?
Oh, it's my apologies. I
That's
should
okay.
have pointed that out. So the FTO process, in a perfect world, it would be 3 different field training officers. And then the last one, the last phase would be with normally the sergeant or someone like that. Currently, most of the time right now with the way it is, we have only a couple certified field training officers in the department right now. So right now they're getting 2 different ones. And so they start with one, they go to the next one, then they go back to the original one. And that's how the process has been going. Once we get more officers to training for field training, then we'll have, we should have 5 or 6 different field training officers by the time we get some people to the field training officer program. You have to have the certification to be able to train them.
Thank you.
Any other input from Assembly members on this discussion item? Okay, seeing none, that brings us to item C under Assembly discussion items, and that is Assembly member comments. Any comments by Assembly members? Member Tremblay.
Thank you. This is kind of following last meeting. I mentioned my thoughts on the issue of ATVs. Right now, 2 things are true. The state has made them legal on roads, and 5 years ago, the majority of Petersburg said they did not want them legal on state roads. So at the last meeting, I had said I was thinking about having them not be legal until the October election, in which case the public could vote on them again. I've kind of been thinking about it more, and I'm leaning more towards now not doing that as far as going for the exemption so that we would opt out and they would be illegal again. Instead, I'm thinking of not doing that, but still having it on the October ballot and thinking of it as like a trial period where ATV owners could use this time to use their ATVs, do the thing to get them legal, follow all of those steps, and then the community can see if they like having ATVs on the road. Unfortunately, it would put ATV owners in the place where they could do all that and the public could still decide they don't like it, in which case those folks did all of that only to have it be taken away. But I'm trying to put 2 things that are true at the same time together, which was the state making them legal 5 years after the public decided they didn't want to. So I'm open to feedback if people want to talk to me about it or email me, whatever. I'm just thinking a lot about it. So yeah, that's my comment.
Fine, well,
Yeah, in that same vein, I'll comment as well. I've been approached by a couple members of the public regarding the ATV issue, and while I think that's a reasonable idea on the part of Assemblyperson Tremblay. I also think it may be worth, extending that trial period, as you put it, into next winter, because I know a lot of people were wishing they were able to use their ATVs more freely in the winter. For instance, using four-wheelers to push snow around, to plow snow. A lot of people, liked that idea, and I think many people in our community were able to help themselves and their neighbors by utilizing snowplows on their four-wheelers. Additionally, parking in some areas becomes scarce in the winter months, perhaps more so in the summer months, but also in the winter months due to storing snow, at least this winter. And there's been I've heard that people think maybe allowing ATVs to operate will free up some parking in parts of the city. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
any other assembly members have comments? Member Stanton Director.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief response to both members Tremblay and Fine Walsh in terms of the previous vote by the public regarding ATVs. It's more of a point of clarification. Jim Curry, you cut me off on missing, of course, but his predecessor, Kelly Swihart, was in a position at that point, in that topic of being a good neighbor and plowing out driveways was brought up during that time. And just to clarify for the listening public, that was Chief Swihart. It was quite clear that the spirit of the law was not to prevent neighbors from plowing out their fellow neighbors. And he was quite clear that that was not a crime and no tickets would be issued in the spirit of helping neighbors during the winter, just as a piece of historical fact.
Any other assembly members have comments? Member Lynn.
Yeah, I don't know if you folks of the rest of the assembly have seen it, but Search has chosen to take their crossing program out of Wrangell, which is about 20 positions. Estimated loss in revenue in Wrangell is a little over $1 million from that decision. It's going to have, and since that's a major employer in Wrangell, the hospital, that's going to have a major impact on their economy over there in the longer run. And that's all really I have.
Yeah, I heard that news article. I was going to talk to Mayor Przonka, but because he was involved in starting that program. Any other assembly members have comments? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this weekend I got to participate in the Share Coalition's childcare workshop that they had. And it was very informative. It was 2 hours Saturday afternoon. Not my best time for a meeting, but it was well worth it. And there were some very, I think, easy to implement ideas that kind of came out with it. I think the hospital is doing a couple of programs that I think the borough should be able to figure out. And later on in the year, probably January, February, later on here, I'll maybe bring some of those ideas forward and have a discussion at the assembly level. Let's see if there's any effort to anybody wants to get on board and move forward with this stuff, because childcare is not going to go away. I think they came out with a figure that it was $15,000 a year for a family to send their kid to childcare while folks can work. So it's an issue that's not going to go away. I'm looking forward to the ARPA work session on the 24th at 4 o'clock. And I think we'll kind of continue that discussion down the line. But yeah, it was a very worthwhile conversation, and I really appreciated it. So thank you to the folks who put it together.
Any other assembly members have comments? If there are no more comments, are there any recognitions? Member Tremblay.
Thank you. First, I'd like to recognize Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the reason we're meeting on Tuesday. And I hope people had a chance to think yesterday about what it means to build a more just and equal world. If you missed that chance, there's no time like tomorrow. And I thought I'd recommend a book. It's called Rising Out of Hatred by Eli Saslow. It's written kind of as a memoir, and it tells a really, really inspiring story of a young man named Derek Black who grew up as the godson of the head of the Ku Klux Klan. And he basically helps turn the white supremacy movement into a modern white supremacy movement. And then as he grows older and joins the broader world, comes to see how big the world really is. And it's really well written and it's very informative and it's one of my favorite books. And so in the spirit of the holiday, I thought I'd do a blanket recommendation because I think everyone should read it. And then my other recognitions include, I'd like to thank the Petersburg Pilot and Ronan and Lesh for their 45 years of community newspaper in town. And I hope that they're not listening. I hope that they're on vacation. So maybe someone, Chris is shaking his head, because I was out of town and I came back and I was able to see all of the reports into dispatch calling for help for water breaks and power breaks. And I was able to see where all that overtime is going in the Borough Department. And so I'd like to thank the pilot for keeping me up to date when I get back to town. And then all the hard workers that were keeping water and electricity going as the nature, had its way with us. So yeah, it took a team and it was really inspiring to come home and see all that.
Recognitions by Assembly members, Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody who kind of came forward and helped dig us out over the last couple of weeks. It was very inspirational to me. We've been fighting about a lot of stuff over the last 2 years, and we had a lot of snow that we had to get rid of, and we had a window of 4 or 5 days to get rid of it before some type of atmospheric river came descending down on us. And it was really weird to drive around town and see snow blowers on roofs, and snow was flying off the roof here. Several places there were snow blowers around town. There were people still shoveling snow yesterday and the day before, and it was really neat to see the community come together and work within the school and municipal building and all the buildings around town, the children's center. It was very inspirational to me, and I want to just thank everybody who did that. It was above and beyond what I had expected over the last year and a half. So thank you very much.
Other recognitions by the Assembly members or staff? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned at 7:02.